The truth's around here somewhere. Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about The X-Files Season 1, Episode 18. It's called Miracle Man. So spoilers for the episode as always. I'm not sure how I feel about this one, honestly. It's kind of a mixed bag, I guess I would say, overall. It gives you bang for your buck, I suppose, in terms of just ideas, because it kind of throws a relative there's a lot of things that happen in the episode, and they kind of all click together by the end. The through line of it is that there's a preacher, a reverend, who raised a young boy who seems to have magical healing powers. There's a flashback at the start showing him resuscitating a burned man from a fire and seemingly bringing him back to life. And then we come to present day, and he's now a young man. He's, maybe 19, 20, something like that. Mulder and Scully are called to the town that this reverend's operating out of because the local sheriff believes that the boy is guilty of murder. Samuel's the boy's name, the miracle kid. So Mulder and Scully go, and from there it becomes kind of just trying to prove or disprove that there's any healing going on, and whether or not there was any murder going on. The actual end result of it, which, as you're watching the episode, I think it becomes pretty clear that the actual culprit of any murders that are going on, I don't think any of us in the audience ever really think it's Samuel. Samuel blames himself. Samuel thinks his gift of healing powers have been replaced by the devil, so now he's got the gift of death. So he believes he's killed people with his touch. But honestly, it's pretty obvious from early on that it's actually Vance, who's the guy that he brought back to life. So the guy that he brought back to life when he was young from the fire, he's become like an assistant to the Reverend. And he kind of has like an Undertaker's hat, and he walks about in a black suit with a cane. He, honestly, quite early on, just has a bit of a suspicious feel about him. His motivations end up being that he hates how he looks because he was burned all over his body, so they've got like a makeup job on this guy to make him look this specific way. So it seems like he wanted to discredit the abilities of Samuel by intentionally poisoning the people that Samuel was trying to heal. And it is quite malicious. Like, he is a big villain because there's a whole thing in the middle of the episode where they've got one of the Reverend church services or whatever they're calling it. He intentionally talks to this woman in a wheelchair. We find out later she has MS, but this woman's obviously really hoping to see Samuel. She's here for the gift of the healing. She's clearly very, she's here really hoping she's going to be cured. She feels desperate. She feels earnest and genuine. And whether or not you believe in anything that's going on here, she clearly does. And she's being very quiet and very timid, but she's very hopeful. And Vance, who's kind of greeting people as they come in, sort of kneels down and says, "Oh, I'll make sure you're in the front row so that Samuel will see you." And sure enough, this woman ends up dying. She dies right as Samuel's trying to heal her with his touch. So it's very malicious because he's effectively picked his victim here that he's going to kill, and she's about as innocent and timid as you could get. So he comes across as a very malicious villain, and I do actually kind of appreciate that in the villain of the episode. I think the episode has such a weird progression as far as plot goes. Like, there's a few sort of plates spinning as to the actual investigation, because you've got investigating who the Reverend is, and you're looking for Samuel, who when they first get to the town is missing. But then they kind of just find him. Like, they're not Mulder and Scully themselves, but the police find him maybe a third of the way in, and Mulder and Scully go see him. And then from there, we have the woman who dies at the service, and then there's a whole courtroom scene that ends with locusts coming into the courtroom to try and look like a biblical thing. Turns out Vance, the burned man, he released a bunch of locusts through the through the vents. He planted some food all down the vents so that the locusts would come in. And this is one of the scenes where I'm like, what episode am I watching here? What are we doing? Like, I think I would probably enjoy this episode a lot more if it was scaled down a little bit. And what I mean by that is, and well, okay, yes, I know that the locust thing was not a real supernatural event, right? They explain that by the end that that's something the bad guy did to try and make it look like the plagues of hell were coming because Samuel's now tied to the devil. He's not really, of course, but that's what they're going with. I think there's just some stuff in this that's just a little bit more like in your face. Like Samuel's eventually killed in the jail cell because the sheriff hates him so much that he has like one of his officers let in some thugs to beat him up to death. When this happens, there's a shot of him like his shadow against the wall, and his arms are up, and he's literally posing like Jesus on the cross. Like that, the imagery is not subtle. It's going full hog. And then later on, when he seemingly has resurrected by his body missing from the morgue, he shows up in Vance's bedroom, and he's literally got a glow around him. Now, you could read this as that he's not really there, and Vance is just seeing this because Vance has decided to commit suicide by drinking some of his own poison to end his guilt and suffering or whatever. So you could read this as not really being there and it's just him. And I appreciate that. I think it would have probably benefited from being more open to interpretation. I think there's just some of it's just a little bit too crazy and in your face. And even though some of it's explained afterwards as, oh, this is how that's happened, it felt like it was going for too much kind of shock and awe, if you will, for me to sort of treat it as a serious kind of like, okay, we're going to like just give you enough to, you know, make your own mind up if you believe or don't believe. And, you know, believing and not believing is such a big thing in the X-Files that doing an episode that revolves around literal faith of a god and you know, all that stuff, it makes sense to maybe draw some comparisons there. But I do think that the Mulder side of this episode I think is really forced, which is when they first meet Samuel, he says that he can see Mulder's pain because he can see people's pain in general, not just physical pain. And Mulder's like, oh yeah, really? What pain have I got? And he's like, oh, you lost a brother. No, a sister. And he starts basically describing when his sister went missing as a kid. He never mentions aliens, but just everything else, the general vibe of it. And it's like, oh, okay. And then Mulder, throughout the episode, starts seeing his little sister, who's still a kid. In fact, I think she's a big sister, not a little sister. But she obviously, I'm saying little sister because she's a kid in these scenes. He keeps seeing her wearing like this red like outfit, and he sees her when he's talking to the Reverend at the Reverend's mansion. He has a bit of a Righteous Gemstones vibe to this Reverend guy. He's making a lot of money from the donations, if you catch my drift. But then you've also got him seeing her again at the service, and then he sees her at the very end of the episode. And at the end of the episode, it kind of tries to sort of tie it into the themes by him admitting that people out here are maybe looking for miracles, and therefore they're sort of almost, you know, tricking themselves. They want so hard to believe that they're seeing something in front of them, which is a fine theme for Mulder to kind of like tackle, and maybe for him to actually admit that maybe something isn't as weird or there isn't a supernatural solution to something. But I felt like the whole seeing the dead sister thing felt really just shoehorned in, because it didn't feel like what he said, just bringing up the sister, did not directly link in my brain to he starts seeing visions of her walking around. No one else in the episode starts seeing visions of people that they care about. Like that's not, it doesn't really tie into anything else that Samuel's doing with other characters. So it just kind of felt like a weird tacked on element, and they tried to sort of make it fit into the episode thematically, right, like I said at the very, very end, but at that point it was just kind of too little too late. Even if I like the point that he's making at the end, because I do like the point that he's making at the end, I still just kind of felt like the episode didn't earn that moment of contemplation. I just don't think it really solved that, especially since it doesn't really feel like we're doing a Mulder episode per se. Like, he has these specific moments, but for the most part we're just kind of dealing with the plot. I wouldn't say this episode really focuses on either Mulder or Scully as characters. They're just kind of there to play their roles. Scully's a fan of The Exorcist. I mean, we learned that at least this episode, so that's some interesting stuff. I think right at the start of the episode, when we first go to the town, we see the sheriff's wife has a handicap sticker on the car, right? This is something I actually grew up with a dad who had MS, so I was used to having the handicaps, parking spaces and things like that. I was used to dealing with that. So my eye, I don't know if that's why I noticed it, but my eye caught it. So they had it there subtly in the bottom of the frame when we first get introduced to that character, and I thought immediately that this was going to result in the miracle kid Samuel like convincing the sheriff that he is legit by curing his wife. At this point, I didn't know what his wife had. I think later on we find out she has bad arthritis, I think they said. But I thought that was a setup for that. And this is actually a compliment I'm about to give the episode, because I think one of the most interesting things the episode does, like for all the other stuff in this episode that I don't really like that much, all the excessive preacher stuff and the more overt things we're seeing with Samuel, it's all just a little bit much. But one of the things that I do really like about this episode is that it didn't take that obvious path. I wouldn't have hated that path if they'd done that, if Samuel had cured his wife. But they kind of do this thing where the sheriff, like, it's kind of like hinting in a nice way as to his motivations for why he hates the preacher and he hates Samuel so much. He hates this idea that these other people are maybe getting cured, and he can't believe. I don't know if they ever said that he tried with his wife at once and it didn't work, and maybe that's why he's upset about it. But it kind of felt like it was a bit more nuanced than that, in that he can't believe there's just such a simple solution for someone that he loves. So it's sort of fostered this hatred over time towards Samuel and this reverend and everything they're doing. I think I appreciated that because right as soon as we meet this sheriff, he's very like anti, this guy. He's very adamant against all this stuff. He thinks most people are idiots for buying into it. And in some level, as an atheist, I was kind of like on his side to a point. But obviously, of course, as the episode goes on, it's clear that he has hatred. He's not just that he's not into this. It's not just that he thinks that it's dangerous what they're making people believe. He actually has a seething vendetta against these characters to the point where he actually has them killed, which I was actually wondering if he was behind it, because it seemed like someone in the police station was behind it. So it made sense to me at the end of the episode that he does get he answers the door and his deputy's there to arrest him, or at least ask him questions for the death. But I think the idea, like him sitting with his wife before that moment, where the wife is basically kind of crying because realizing that because at this point there's stories in the newspaper of Samuel, like his body disappearing, and now the story's spreading that he's risen from the dead, that he's had his second coming, if you will. She clearly is upset, and it seems like she's upset because she's starting to believe that he was real, that there was a chance that he could have maybe cured her, and now the husband's sitting there kind of with this guilt that he's the one who took that chance away from her. I thought this little feeling here and the way it played off with these two characters was the most interested I ever got, because it felt like it was the most developed. It was the most developed out of all the guest characters. It felt like the most interesting and just poignant story for all of them. I felt that all the other characters were a little bit more, like Vance. Okay, so he feels vindictive because while he was saved, he hates how he looks. He hates that he's not normal, and he blames Samuel and that for that. Okay, right, simple enough, but it's not exactly anything super intriguing. Similar with Samuel himself, like there is maybe an interesting place they could have went with this idea that he's convinced he's guilty, but the law and Mulder's like, hey, no, you're not guilty. Like these people were poisoned. It was not you. But Samuel believes it was him. There's maybe an interesting story that could have developed there about how he has been completely and utterly taught all these things from a young age from this reverend, that he's so devout in his beliefs that he's blaming himself for something he didn't do. And that's maybe still somewhat a conventional idea for a strong religious story, right? The idea of like someone who grew up in a religious family. I'm thinking something like even something like Carrie, where the way Carrie's mum has raised her, and she's so devout, and it's like, no, if you do anything wrong, it's the devil that's in you, and sort of justifies a lot of what she does by using religion in that way. Because I think for most of the episode, you don't really know for sure, like, if the Reverend is like a good person and if this is all just a con or a sham or whatever, or if he is good, then like what else is going on here, right? I think for a bit of the episode, I was kind of expecting like, oh no, he's been doing awful things all this time, and maybe he's even the one killing people. Although that doesn't make much sense for his business, given that this is very profitable, seemingly. So I kind of appreciate that there's like some deeper facets to the various things that are going on in the episode, but I just don't think that they all come together as well as I would like. I don't think that thematically everything all just clicks together in a way where I feel like all of the plots, or it's not even like it's different plots. It's just all of the groups of characters that are in the plot. They all have something interesting potentially to them, but there's maybe just not enough time to really develop all of them, and as a result, some of the progression feels a little bit rushed or feels a little bit hammy in how it's done. Like, like Samuel's death, I think, is one of the big moments where I almost rolled my eyes at it because it was so over the top, and especially when he was glowing when he came back to talk to Vance as a ghost. or whatever he is now. The moments like that just felt a little too hammy to really appreciate some of the deeper themes that the episode was kind of scratching the surface at. And I think if we had gotten more of, an exploration of Samuel being so devout that he can't believe that he's actually innocent, and how he's been kind of beaten down with these teachings his whole life, or hell, the best thing in the episode is the sheriff's motivation with his wife, and maybe if we could have done more with that and really explored him as a character a bit more, I think I would have enjoyed that too. I think as it is, you've got all these elements, and the episode kind of almost like, we start off with them just coming to a town to investigate this preacher, and then 10-15 minutes later, Mulder's seeing a ghost of his sister. There's locusts invading a courtroom, and it's so scattershot in its ideas to a point that I never feel like it locked into a key vibe that it wanted to give me. And I think a lot of the best episodes just feel a bit tighter and more focused. And I think the ideas are kind of there. It's just that maybe this just needed a few more drafts. It just needed to maybe lose a character somewhere just to tighten things up. I think you take Vance out. If I'm seriously trying to suggest a solution to this, I think the most interesting thing about this episode is the sheriff and his motivation for hating Samuel. So Samuel also has to exist in the story, and then he's also interesting because he's been taught believing all this stuff, and now he's having trouble believing anything else. I think those two elements are interesting, and they obviously play off each other, right? I think there's a good story there between those two. Bizarrely, I think the murders and having a culprit who we also have to deal with the Vance character just means that there's too much in the episode to actually do. We have to spend time with Mulder and Scully investigating the courtroom and finding the grasshoppers so they know who the killer is. We have to spend so much time dealing with that part of it that I think if you took out all of the actual murder investigation stuff. Now, admittedly, at that point, what are Mulder and Scully there for? I admit, I don't know. Like, that's the problem with this suggestion. Like, I don't have a perfect fit answer, but I feel like if you take out Vance and you give more time to just that key conflict of basically the religious miracle kid, Samuel, who is been raised super religious and has to be kind of talked out of it almost, and then you have the antagonist of him who is very anti-religious in this case, but has to be, I don't know, like there's kind of like a yin and yang thing going on, and I feel like there's a better version of this episode without all the Vance stuff kind of weighing it down. Same with the Reverend to a point as well. Like, I feel like I was expecting there to be more of him as the episode went on, but then it never really kind of happened. I was expecting to learn more about how he found the kid. I know they do say it in a scene quickly, They say that he found him in like a cornfield or something like that. Some miraculous finding of a child. He Martha and Jonathan Kent found Clark in the field, right? Maybe there was a crash ship. They never mentioned that part, but I've got my suspicions. But I think there was more there to develop as well. So I think fundamentally, it's just there's a lot of interesting ideas in this episode. It could have just used like losing one or two characters or ideas and just focusing in. I think Mulder seeing his dead sister, cut that out, give that time to developing the characters better, and then Vance somehow cut him out. You still have to maybe give there a reason to why Mulder and Scully are here. I mean, maybe you set the whole episode after Samuel's been killed, and Mulder and Scully come in to investigate his murder, and then maybe there's flashbacks that fill in all the Samuel story. Still get to the end result of it being the sheriff who's behind his murder. Maybe that's how you do it. That sounds more interesting to me. I get this is probably a frustrating review, and it's frustrating for me to talk about an episode like this because I don't. You know, often what I like to do is say, okay, this is how the episode's accomplishing what it's doing. Like, so that episode, it was very scary and made me question the meaning of life by the end. Okay, how did it do that? And you go through it. With an episode like this, all I see are things that I want to fix because I want to improve it. And I realize that me kind of fan rewriting the script is probably not necessarily exactly what you want from one of these reviews, but it's just that type of episode to me. There's more interesting things we could have done with some of this. It's not a terrible episode. There's been worse episodes in this season for sure. It at least had some interesting concepts going on and some moments here or there, but yeah, I'll leave it there. There you go. That was episode 18 of the X-Files. What's coming next time, I wonder? Episode 19 next week is called Shapes, and here's the description on IMDb. A creature, possibly from Native American lore, oh no, is suspected of killing a man, bringing Mulder and Scully to the Indian reservation where the attack occurred in order to uncover its identity. Okay, I'm a little worried. Now, David Nutter is directing this one, so it should be well directed. That's good. And the rating on IMDb is not bad either. It's okay. But I tend to not like episodes of shows where they go to I said this earlier, actually. I think when I was talking about the Amish episode, I said this, but Native American tends to be the most common version of it, which is your cop, your investigator goes into a community and it feels like it's mostly just doing a bunch of like stereotypes of that community and often leaves me feeling kind of hollow. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, there's some reasons to not be too pessimistic, but that's the review. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. I will see you guys next time. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Get some bonuses while you're at it. If not, that's okay. Just hit the like button. Helps us out a lot if you do. More people will find the channel and the reviews. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?